This is the next level of GitHub Issues templates. You can give your contributors a proper form with all separate text areas, all the instructions, checkboxes, you can get defaults, and much more. But let's start from the beginning. In one of my projects, I have these two templates in Markdown that are supposed to help you writing an issue. But I don't really like having those comments here, everything in one text block. I noticed that in other projects well maintained, you can actually specify a proper template like this one, where you can actually have separate blocks, you have drop downs, you have checkboxes, making your experience in writing an issue way better. And also, I noticed that on VSCode, you can actually add external links. For example, if you have questions, you can directly jump on Stack Overflow. By the way, 4K reputation. And now I want that level of user experience in my project too. So let's see what GitHub lets us do. By the way, my name is Leonardo and I talk about open source and web development every week. If you're interested in these two topics, you better subscribe to my channel. And with that said, let's get back to our GitHub issue templates. I set up this test project so that I can experiment with all the features and I can show them to you. First of all, here I added a couple of external links. For example, you can join Discord or directly go on contributing.md if you want to know more. We will see later how you can set this up. But the most interesting thing is this template finally with all the features I confided in the documentation. Let's begin from the prefix. As you can see here, I added part of a title that is already filled. And let's move for a second on the right column. I can set an assignee, I can set labels, and all those were automatically defined in the template. But I know you also want to have a look at the code, so there it is. Now, what I just said, you can find here name and description, that are basically the ones you find here outside of the window. And when you go back to the form, this is the prefix, the labels, and the assignees. Now, let's go to the first block. This is actually a Markdown block. You can use this if you want to add some text before or in between your form. You can then set up a text area, that is this one that also gets bigger when you focus, so that you can have all the controls, you can see the preview, and if you go to another one, you can see that only the selected one is actually expanded. But what else we can do in our text area? Well, we can add an ID that will be used later to pass the data to the actual issue, and you can add some attributes, for example, a label, this one, a placeholder, and you can decide if this is required or not. Obviously, required field have this red asterisk. You can also go multi-line with this pipe here, so that your placeholder will actually go there, and it's really useful if you want to say, for example, steps reproduced, that is actually a list, and you can write each point in each line. But let's move on to something slightly more interesting, that is checkboxes. You can add checkboxes here, and obviously the type is checkboxes, and I actually didn't understand why, but you cannot add a single checkbox here, or at least there's not a checkbox control. There's only checkboxes, which actually lets you add more than one. But anyway, nothing stops you to add multiple checkboxes fields with only one option. Here you can see I added one as required, while the other one is optional. And for example, it is really useful if you want to say that who created the issue actually wants to work on that. That's a really cool usage of this checkbox. At the end of the form, you might want to add another Markdown block to thank you, your user, for reporting or for creating an issue. But that's not everything. For example, the block here is actually called Markdown, which means you can actually put proper Markdown in it. For example, you can add a heading. Beware, if you use this symbol, you must enclose it in quotes, otherwise it might break your YAML definition file. But anyway, just add the double quotes and you will see that it is rendered as a heading. You can obviously add a multi-line text and a single line input. Again, you can add a placeholder, a label, you can say if it's required or optional. And this brings us to the last control you can add, that is a drop down. You can either have a single drop down here so that you can select only one option or go back to none. Or you can actually have a multi drop down, you can specify here multiple true, so that your user can select more than one option. And now if I want to submit, you see that the button is grayed out, obviously because I didn't fill all the required fields. So let's give it a try, only to see if this works. Now the button is enabled, and if I click it, there you have it. This is the actual issue, properly formatted with the checkboxes, the output of the drop-downs, and everything is properly set. And I think this is a great user experience and actually helps your users creating better issues. Just one thing I want to point out, now that we have this cool graphical interface, please don't add too many required fields, or otherwise you will end up someone not creating issues just because the process is way too long. But didn't we forget about anything? Oh yeah, when you create a new issue, we said I wanted to add those links. But how can I do that? It's easier than you might think. Just make sure that in the same issue template folder, you also add a file called config.yaml. This file will basically contain two values. If you want to enable or disable the empty issue, so that you can basically create, it's here, a blank empty issue, and you can add an array of contact links. For example, here, like I said, there's this Discord invite, or a link to the contributing.md of your repository. And you can basically put whatever external link you want. Anyway, if the Markdown template is okay for you, you should try to go to the settings, scroll down a little bit, and here you can find Setup Templates. If you click it, you will find your Markdown templates properly listed here. You can add one from these three templates of templates. And with Preview and Edit, you can actually use pretty much the same form we already seen, but to create the template. You can specify here assignats, labels, default title, and all those core features we already seen in the proper form, but the content will be again the same single block of Markdown. I mean, this is not bad. If you don't have too many fields or too many things to fill, this is more than fine. And actually, I really like this kind of editor. It's super simple to use. One thing worth mentioning, if you have some errors here, make sure to select the proper JSON schema. You can type template right after clicking down there, and the name is GitHub Issue Template Configuration. With this one, the errors will disappear. And the same goes here. In order to have this super handy autocomplete with the list of only the valid inputs, you also have to make sure that GitHub Issues form is the actual schema selected for this JSON file. And that was it. You can see the final result here on my repository. You can find the templates, the defaults, and by the way, this GitHub Stats is a community project. You can also join and leave a star. We already have some forks and we're having fun. So if you want to contribute, just GitHub Stats, join the project. And with that said, thanks for watching this video and see you in the next one. Bye!